we've got 45 people in.
Helps I press the right button, doesn't it?
It does facilitate the situation.
It does. Right, that's definite. We should be live. Wave back at me if we're live, everyone. That's the only way I'll know. Good evening and welcome to another live debate. Apologies that we're running slightly late, but, you know, stuff and things. So I will hand you straight over to Mr. Baldy / Conspiracy Catz, who will explain the new, exciting format to you.
Yeah, you know, it's growing out a little bit at the minute. I don't know if you can see it. Like, I'm almost, it's almost getting in my eyes.
Yeah, you'll have to change your name to Stubbly Catz.
So, yeah, the new exciting format. Myself and Creaky had a think last week, and we thought that we were doing too much of an extended introduction. So 10 minutes of an intro, then 10 minutes of rebuttal. It was taking 45, 50 minutes before we got into the proper back and forth. So we've changed things. Creaky has done some computer wizardry, and we now have a timer that can appear on the screen. And we've reduced the opening segments to just 8 minutes, and then we're going to go straight to the back and forth. So we're just going to change things that way. I want to thank both people who are in the debate now for stepping in at what was late notice, really. So thanks you to both of you. I really, really appreciate that. And I'm just a bit of orange. I'm just putting your details into our description now so people can click. While I'm doing that, do you want to shill yourself out? Tell everybody what you do, about your blog, about your channel. Just shill yourself out and let people know kind of generally what your, what your stance is.
Well, I wish I had merch to hawk. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Brian. I'm from A Bit of Orange. It's basically just a friendly mid-level apologetics channel. I am a Christian, and in terms of today's topic, I am a young earth biblical creationist, which means I take the book of Genesis as being essentially literal in terms of it being a historical account of creation in 6 days, about 6,000 years ago. And so my channel is my attempt to be entertaining and informative about the science, philosophy, history, etc., which defends the Christian worldview. And again, specifically today, the creationist worldview. So I don't have any merch to hawk. I wish I did, although I do have a book on Amazon now, which you can buy in paper if you're into paper books like some of us are, or it's on Kindle and you can borrow it for free on the Kindle. It's called Thursday Night Nachos, the Defining Evolution series. So look for that on paperback or on Amazon, wherever books are sold on Amazon. How's that?
Absolutely fantastic.
Perfection.
All right.
Yeah, we'll keep reminding people as the show goes on. I'm still just updating. Whoops, muted myself there. Now, I've lost you completely. What have I done? I've clicked off the window. I can't find the Zoom stream.
We've kicked you out, Catz. You were just getting really boring. So if we could, if we could allow JL Truth to shill himself out as well, and I think then we should get straight into it, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm JL. People do call me JL Truth. My channel is JL Warren. You can find me on YouTube. I am also the creator and co-host of the Week in Horror podcast. It's a horror film podcast, kind of a filmmaker deep dive. We come out new episodes every Sunday. You can check out that channel on YouTube, Week in Horror. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter and follow our feeds for the daily splatter. We also have a Patreon. If you really love what we're doing, you can support us there at patreon.com/weekinhorror, or get in touch with us with anything you want, weekinhorror@gmail.com for more information. Check out our website, weekinhorror.net. If you'd like to get our swag, which is we have a monthly mystery horror shirt that we give away. So just punch in your email there for our mailing list, and that enters you automatically forever to get a horror shirt every single month. Other than that, you can usually find me on here on other people's channels, like Creaky and Catz here have invited me on, debating theists and other woo believers, as I am an atheist. And I guess we'll get started today.
Perfect. Catz, are you still muted? You look stunned then, like a rabbit in headlights.
What I was trying to do.
Hey, Catz, you weren't prepared for that, were you?
I was not, but just let people know I am completely. I'm even in my work clothes today. Like I literally just got in from work before we started, and Creaky did as well this week.
Yeah,
and,
I did. And for once, look, I've actually got trousers on tonight. So it's obviously a special occasion.
I just got in from work as well, so
I'm not wearing pants.
I
rarely do.
Jail Truth, if you email me your description and your anything you want, we'll also whack that in the description of the video as well. If you email us any links you want. So we haven't decided yet who's going to go first, but we do have 8 minutes each for an opener. Before I toss a coin or something like that, does anybody particularly want to go first?
I have no preference.
I'm good, however.
You're going to have it? Right, well, I'll tell you what, I will toss...
Flip a coin, let the fates decide.
I will toss a Beck's Blue non-alcoholic beer. Right. Head's a bit of orange, and it is head's a bit of orange. So you've sent some images in. If you want any of those, bring it up. If you just call out the title, and then I'll tell Creaky what slide he needs to go to, because I'll put it all on a PowerPoint for him. Right, Creaky, you let us know when you're ready with the stop clock.
I'm ready whenever you are.
Images during the intro here. I'll pull those up later as we discuss what it is I've said. And
cool.
So you won't need your slides until we're doing the back and forth a bit of orange, yeah?
Just save time to make sure I stay
cool beans, yeah, absolutely awesome. There we are. Whenever you're ready, the timer is starting.
So I'm not just sorry. Just before you start, I don't want you thinking we're being rude. If as soon as it hit 8 minutes, start again. We're not being rude. If as soon as it hits 8 minutes, we will cut you off, and that's going to be the same for everybody. So just to let you know, we'll be quite ruthless with that. But anyway, as soon as you're ready,
whenever you're ready, starting now.
All right, in short, I am a young earth biblical creationist. I believe Genesis is an accurate historical account of how God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days about 6,000 years ago. So to be clear, Genesis does not teach that God made all of the variations which exist today as they are today. He created the different kinds, what in most cases we would probably classify as classes or orders. So they were made with perfect genomes with no damaging mutations or damage at all in the beginning, and with a wide range of genetic information allowing for a huge range of genetic diversity, resulting in a huge range of variations and adaptations, many of which exist today. So we represent this with the creationist orchard, which I will show you later. So biblical creation is, and evolution is not, these four things. Number one, creation by an intelligent designer. Number two, a great deal of functional genetic information in the past, gradually decaying over time into less functional genetic information. Number three, a great deal of genetic information in the beginning of a kind being disseminated through subsequent generations so that genes are shuffled and sometimes lost over time. And number four, animals reproducing only within the genetic boundaries of their kinds and no kind ever giving rise to a different kind. So our study of the language systems and genetics and the amazing irreducible complexity and the machinery of every living cell and the irreducible complexity of chemical pathways and living things, as well as the complexity of every organ system, shows design on every level. The living world, from the relationships between certain dependent species, as well as the vast complexity and information-rich systems in every cell, tells us with certainty that natural processes and mere chance over time cannot explain what we observe. Observation tells us that evolution is false. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that because these things are too complex for us to know how they could come about naturally, that God must have done it. I am saying that a full understanding of these things is what informs us that natural chance cannot account for it, and that life demands a designer. It's what we do know, not what we don't know, which refutes the evolution of the gaps. It's the continuing information learned by the scientists that tells us that natural chance cannot account for the complexity of the cell, the information and language systems and DNA, or the diversity of life on Earth. Now, while many creationists would follow that trail to show intelligent design and then contrast to show creation to be the more plausible explanation for what we observe in biology, I take a different track. I assert that one does not need to accept creation or intelligent design in order to reject evolution. Darwinian evolution fails on its own merits. If Darwinian evolution is defined according to the writings of Charles Darwin and the story it's intended to tell, and then it's examined in the light of what can be known through science, we will see that Darwinian evolution fails on its own merits. But in order to understand why, we have to understand what evolution is. So, what is evolution? Let's start with a brief talk about what it is not. I have this textbook. It's called Evolution, Change Over Time. And this is probably the most common definition. The problem with this is that everything that ever happens is a change over time. So on this definition, evolution simply means things happen, which is true, but not clear enough to explain Darwinian evolution. Also, creation doesn't teach that nothing changes over time, so this can't even distinguish between the two models. I drink coffee, it's good for you. An evolutionist recently defined it for me this way. He said, evolution is the means by which speciation and biodiversity occurs. And again, it sounds good on the surface, but this describes the effect and not the cause. It tells me that biodiversity results from evolution, but doesn't tell me what evolution is. So let's start with the Darwinian tree of life. The tree of life is the history of life on Earth according to Darwinian evolution. And in order to grow the Darwinian tree, evolution must be four things. Number one, evolution has to be something to do with living things. Number two, evolution is something about life changing over time. Number three, evolution is something which is intended to explain the origin of different kinds of plants and animals. And number four, evolution tells a story wherein all living things arose through past common ancestors until far back enough in time, we reach a first universal common ancestor, making the history of life on Earth a big tree of life. Or going forward in time from the beginning, it explains how simple things like bacteria became worms, that became fish, that became lizards, which became rodents, which became primates, some of which is us humans. So in order to give rise to and grow the Darwinian tree of life, thus accounting for all of the plant and animal kinds that live now and which have lived in the past, here is how I believe evolution needs to be defined. Evolution is an unguided natural process which increases the genetic information in an organism, creating new genes which did not previously exist. These new genes then cause an increase in physical complexity and associated behavior, both of which increase the organism's ability to survive and pass on these traits to offspring. So this definition makes sense of the Darwinian tree of life, the proposed origin of species, and the story evolution is intending to tell in light of our modern understanding of genetics and how the information in genes results in the structures and functions and associated behavior of every biological system. This definition requires no acceptance or even consideration of a creator or intelligent design. It merely defines evolution according to the proposed Darwinian history of life illustrated by the tree and our modern understanding of how genetics controls all of those factors for individuals and populations. So, in short, once you've defined evolution according to what Darwinism means and what the tree of life is intending to tell us, then natural selection, genetic drift migration, genetic shuffling, changes in allele frequency, vestigial organs and structures, and mutations all fail the test of science when evolution is defined this clearly. In short, they are not evolutionary processes. Most of them can't even hypothetically do the job, and the one which can is so improbable that it can be considered impossible. Anytime these mechanisms or any other observable fact is used as evidence for evolution, it first requires faith in evolution. The facts have to be defined or understood through the lens of evolution before they can be used to defend evolution. Thus, evolutionism demands one to use evolution as evidence for evolution in order for there to be any evidence for it at all. Evolution becomes a self-fulfilling religious dogma that requires a blind faith. It can't stand the test of science, which is why any definition proposed for it is as meaningless and untestable as the changed over time that I showed you on my textbook here. So, in summary, scientific observation shows us that the absolute demand for an intelligent designer and shows us with absolute certainty that unguided nature could never produce life or all of its existing diversity. When evolution is defined clearly according to the story it is intended to tell, we see that all of the proposed mechanisms of evolution cannot produce the Darwinian tree of life. Evolution fails the test of science with no prior acceptance of creation, theism, or intelligent design. Evolution fails on its own merits. Creation is the faith that fits the facts, and evolution is the faith the facts have failed. Once you've seen the universe cannot be its own explanation and that life needs a designer, then Genesis tells you who that designer is and how he made the heavens and the earth in the beginning. Thank you.
You did that with 45 seconds to spare, so I don't know how I should have put something that I could use to stop the timer, but well, I didn't. So in a few moments, yeah, it's going to carry on counting down, and it's very exciting. It's very exciting indeed. So
I don't actually see the timer.
You would if you were on the stream itself.
On the YouTube channel. Okay.
Yeah, you won't see it from where you are. There's 14 seconds remaining.
Beat the clock. And I beat the clock.
And you did a fine job, sir. You did a fine job. So that just quickly while we're waiting for my
I'm happy.
While we're waiting for my spectacular siren, time's up. Even though you finished 45 seconds ago. But that's what you would expect to hear. I don't know how quickly you can all hear it, or even if you can. I didn't think of that. But I'll just shout times out. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Very impressive.
I've posted... Thanks. I've posted.
I'm sorry, I meant the opening speech. I wasn't being sarcastic about your clock. I meant the opening speech is very impressive.
About my what? You've not seen it. I've just posted the in the community tab. So if anybody wants to submit any questions for a bit of Orange or JL Truth, you can do it in the community tab. But as usual, super chatted questions will be given priority. So, Kat, have you got anything to add, or are we handing straight over to Mr. Majestic Beard? JL Truth.
Other than we already have had a super chatty question, so I'm going to thank Basic Trigonometry for that. And we will pass you on. So when you're ready, Creaky will start his fantastic clock. There you win.
There we are. Whenever you're ready, JL Truth. Fire away.
Thank you. Thank you, Conspiracy Cats and Creaky Blinder, for having me on. And thank you to my opponent, Brian, for agreeing to engage in this discussion on creationism. I'm JL. I am an atheist. Before we get going, I wanted to nail down a couple of things so that they don't become issues as we get further into the Discord. Firstly, what is atheism? The standard definition of atheism is the disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. I think that definition is a bit meager and open to the odd interpretation by theists, so I'd like to refine it with the more widely accepted definition that harkens back to the etymology of no God. That atheism is a rejection of the claim of not just a God, but all things denoted as supernatural or beyond the realm of scientific understanding or the laws of demonstrable reality. Now, atheism is not a religion, nor is it a belief system. It makes no true-false claims. It worships nothing, possesses no faith, and the atheist bases their conclusions solely upon the evidence at hand, weakening or strengthening their degree of certainty in any claim that is made. Secondly, the use of the term theory. Here, it is not the colloquial use of theory, as in, I have a theory, I know what's happening somewhere at some specific time based on my feelings at any given moment, but the scientific definition of theory, meaning the highest standard level in science, that through consistent testing over time, predictions, and overwhelming supportive evidence, it is deemed objectively true. Thirdly, the problems with and logical inconsistencies of faith. I want to focus on two Bible passages that put these issues into very sharp relief. King James Version, Hebrews 11:1 states faith as the evidence of things unseen. We know that unseen things, including the supernatural, have no demonstrable evidence to support their existence. Ultimately, this passage is telling its followers to put their belief into things that there exists no evidence for, or more simply, to believe in things that are not justified. And the second passage is KJV Romans 14:22, where it states that happy is he that condemneth not himself in the thing in which he alloweth. I know that's not entirely clear at first, but other versions of the Bible do clarify it up. The New Life Version states, keep the faith you have between yourself and God. A man is happy if he knows he is doing right. The issue here is that the Bible is shielding the person's faith from external scrutiny and also stripping the follower of any responsibility for any behaviors or decisions made as a result of knowing they are right. This mode of thinking falls directly in line with the thought control portion of the Hassan Bite model used to identify cults, something which all religions certainly meet the criteria for. And lastly, that evolution holds no bearing on the argument of creationism. The 2 points are mutually exclusive, so thus attacking evolution to support a creator is merely a straw man. Evolution is the observed, demonstrated, laboratory replicated, and fully understood mechanism by which we explain the diversity of life on this planet. It is not related to the hypotheses of abiogenesis, but merely the mechanism that comes after it. So with those things nailed down, I feel we can really get into the meat of the issue, and that is creationism. Why there is no evidence to support it, and how it is a fundamental lack of understanding of the functions of our planet and our demonstrable reality that leads to assertions of the supernatural or the magical to justify personal subjective conclusions that seek only to support indoctrinated belief systems. There are many hypotheses as to the original beginning of life on this planet, of how living organisms arose from seemingly inorganic or inanimate substances, from hydrothermal vents in the ocean floor to methane subsisting protocells deep below the surface of the Earth. Ultimately, no one on Earth knows the actual events because none of us were there. But whether it be natural systems of organic chemistry eventually finding their necessary composition over billions of years, or those molecules being delivered to Earth via panspermia, what matters is what the evidence supports. And while the evidence currently supports that the hydrothermal vent hypothesis is the most probable, there is absolutely no evidence of any sort to support the spontaneous creation of life by a single and absolute creator, designer, or supernatural being. And that brings us to God. that inimitable yet hidden force that drives the motivations of so many. God, and by extension, the religions that weed up around it, is rooted in our very earliest and most ignorant attempts to understand our world and the patterns that we see in it, and that we have, over the past 100,000 years, through scientific exploration of our world, have come to the conclusion that primordial and superstitious pattern explanation has no place in determining truth. That pattern recognition is a survival trait that we have developed over millions of years, and it often results in incorrect perceptions of stimulus as objects. Known as pareidolia, or its greater form, apophenia, is a result of the brain attempting to derive patterns out of chaos, faces in abstract patterns, shapes in clouds, hidden messages in music. These are all examples of this natural phenomenon. Given what we know about how the brain works through the neurosciences, we can begin to infer how primitive humans, lacking any complex scientific understanding, attributed natural phenomena to supernatural entities. But then many creationists will ask the question, if there is no God, then where does morality come from? Our tendency as a species is to make decisions or act in ways that yield positive outcomes, and they must come from somewhere. And that tendency does derive from somewhere. It derives from us. Through the advancement of our frontal lobes, our ability to create abstract ideas, our nature as a social species, and evolutionary game theory all play a part in reinforcing cooperative actions towards positive sums, in favor of detracting actions, which may benefit the individual, but ultimately lead to negative sums in the payoff matrix. With all this, we begin to see that not only is there no evidence to support the existence of a God or gods or the supernatural, but there is no logically consistent reason to hold on to such antiquated belief systems. The descriptive laws of our reality, our understanding of natural sciences, and our willingness to admit ignorance while striving to continue to learn keeps us honest and logically consistent. Ultimately, the insertion of God or gods into the abiogenesis argument is the last vestige of theists who lost their battle against those things that are absolutely understood about our reality. It is one of several still unanswered questions, gaps in our knowledge that the nebulous form of a deity can easily slide into, but we must remember a time when the mystery of the lights in the sky, or the brilliant flash of a bolt of lightning, or illness, or patterns in the environment were all gaps that God or Odin or Zeus or the Great Spirit or Vishnu all easily filled. We cannot forget that even the greatest scientific minds throughout history held on to belief systems that we know now to be absolutely false, from Newton's belief in alchemy, to Alfred Wallace's love of seances, to James Watson's use of genetics to try and support his racism. It is with the driving force of our curiosity and the embracement of exploration, experimentation, and education that we as a species will cease in indoctrinating our children to believe that they must inherently rely on imaginary things to justify their existence, that we will cease the needless pursuit of tribalistic societal divides, and that we will eventually slip off the chains of the supernatural that bind our behaviors, thoughts, and emotions, and exit the dark ages of superstition, ignorance, and fear, and stride boldly into the light of knowledge, reason, and discovery. Thank you.
And you've done it inside the 8 minutes as well. So I wish I sorted out how to stop this timer. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Catz, I'll hand it over to you.
I like the timer because it helps me, remember how to count backwards. I do like it. Right, a bit of Orange. I've got your descriptions and stuff in the. I've got your links in the description. General Truth, I've just found your YouTube channel. Is it the one with 3 videos on?
Yes, that's my personal one. And there's also the Week in Horror one, just Week in Horror.
Right, which one do you want me to spam?
You can do the Week in Horror one.
It's just called Weekend Horror. Right, just to make sure I get this right. And then
3 words, Week in Horror.
Right, I will do that. Now, I thought that was fantastic from both of you. You know, I really, really appreciate the time and effort you've obviously put into preparing those. So thank you so much. We're just pretty much going straight into the back and forth now. It's a little bit of a change from other weeks. The only thing we ask, and I know you could, this is more for the people watching than YouTube because I know that you're very civil people anyway. But the only thing we ask is that when we're speaking, we just let the other person finish before we speak over them. That's it. We're not expecting you to agree, but just let the other person finish. And I know you will, but that's more for the audience. And anyone watching who doesn't want to come on to debate because you think we're not fair, we are definitely fair. Because I've had that labelled at me once or twice. So I guess who wants to start? I mean, who's got a question that you want to bring up just to start the conversation flowing? Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can, sir, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. This is going to sound different than I mean it, but in all sincerity, what was the topic that you were told we're discussing? Because I was told it's creation evolution, but you went through like 10 different topics and evolution was only one. So were you intending or expecting
that this was
us
a debate
to debate?
on creation? That this was a debate on creationism, and evolution has nothing to do with creationism.
Okay, so all the stuff about atheism and what theism is and how that was just your foundation for your position. It's not that you expected me to debate with you about the definition of atheism or anything like that, right?
No, it's just
Okay.
I was solidifying definitions as to particular things so that we don't get confused or we don't have confusion down the road. So that
Okay.
these are what these things are, and we can move on from there. But yeah, the debate was about creationism, and evolution doesn't really factor into it because creationism is about the start, evolution is about the continuation after the start, and the two are mutually exclusive. So one does not herald. You can have you could have a god and still have evolution as we know it, as we've demonstrated it, but evolution doesn't say that there is a god. So attacking evolution is a bit of a straw man. So simply going after abiogenesis and the evidence that we have towards that.
Okay.
I think to be fair, sorry on that, we did call the debate evolution versus creationism. There might have been something lost in translation on email. So, but both are fine because these often turn into informed discussions anyway. And if one of you wants answers on creationism, wants the other one to defend that, fine. And I'm sure a bit of Orange of you for more things against evolution. I'm sure JL Truth is prepared to answer those as well. So take it whichever angle you want, but I'll just let you.
Yeah, I was informed that it was going to be a debate on creationism, and whereas creationism relies on one simple thing is the assumption that there is a God, that's the juxtapose of that, and that evolution itself as a mechanism is how we explain the diversity of life, the repetition of gene alleles over time. So one is separate from the other. If there is you'd say there is a God, and through evolution that is the mechanism by which life diversified, or you can say there is no God and evolution is still the mechanism by which life diversified. And that's demonstrable, that's laboratory tested. We've seen it, we've recreated in the lab, we've observed speciation. We know that it occurs. We see it rapidly, and as the evolutionary biologist Gould has presented, that evolution typically has long periods where it's almost static, almost stasis, and then can rapidly progress in the presence of major evolutionary pressures. So we've seen that, we've demonstrated, we know it to be objectively true. There's no argument about that. And so the argument falls back on creationism and the existence of a god, or the existence of a deity or supernatural entity or something that's there. And is that what kicked this whole ball off, or has it just been billions of years of organic chemistry looking for its niche to where it could finally basically assemble in the way that it needed to in order to kick off DNA, and DNA just does what it does naturally.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to get your perception of where the conversation is going, and I think I'm getting it. But as you've said a couple times there, that evolution is something we have observed in the laboratory, et cetera, et cetera. Can you give me what you would consider to be your definition of what you mean when you talk about evolution? Define
evolution is the repetition of gene alleles over time.
Isn't that just reproduction?
That's evolution.
Well, how does that distinguish evolution from just reproduction of life?
Well, it's the repetition of particular gene alleles over time. And those gene alleles are repeated through, those particular gene alleles are repeated and chosen for via evolutionary pressures.
Well, but anytime anything reproduces, whether it's asexually or sexually, there's going to be repetition of alleles because it only has its own alleles to pass on. So how is that evolution instead of just reproduction?
Well, I don't think you're following here. So when species reproduce and they continue to reproduce, their alleles are passed on. Okay. Oh. But over time, over millions and millions of years, there will be changes in that code, slight variations in that code. Some are beneficial, some are non-beneficial, some are neutral. And the beneficial ones will enable survival against evolutionary pressures like environmental pressures or, various things that occur in the environment, higher predation, whatever, like that, climactic changes. But there are small changes that will enable survival over non-changes. And sometimes they're beneficial, sometimes they're detrimental, but the beneficial ones will enable that species to continue to breed. And then those alleles become more frequent. And then so they are chosen for by natural selection through, in the face of evolutionary pressures, and those get repeated. And therefore we eventually see changes in those individuals until speciation occurs, and then we get divergence.
Okay. Sorry. I mean, I'm familiar with all this, of course. I'm just, I guess what I'm trying to define is how you would distinguish, how you would define evolution so that it's distinguishable from the creation model, except for in the very, very beginning of the story, I guess. Tell you what.
Well, we know through mitochondrial DNA, and we know.
Let me clarify my point here. Okay. Can you bring up my image? It's called definition has to distinguish. Because I'm not doing a good job explaining what I mean, but. And am I going to see it when it comes up? Baldy Catz, your mic's off.
Catz, you muted. Are you going to see what orange the slides?
Sorry, I've just said it's slide number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And answer your question about we'll be able to see it. If you've got the watch page open to the side, that you'll be able to see it on the watch page. Obviously, there's a bit of a delay.
Yeah, there's about a 30-second delay, but it's on the screen now. So by the time you open the watch page, you should be able to see it. Slide number 9. Your definition has to distinguish between these two models.
Right. So, sorry, I have them in front of me. I don't know what the audience is seeing, so I'm trying to make sure everybody's on the same page here. So, what I'm getting at is that one of the problems that I have with this definition, and this is true on both sides, is that the concept of evolution is so ambiguously defined. Like I said, I've got a textbook here called Change Over Time, where just anything that ever happens is just labeled as evolution. And people go, well, there it is. It's proven. I had a guy tell me that because he himself is not an identical clone of his mother, that is evolution. And my point is that if you compare the biblical creation model with the Darwinian evolution model, you know, if you're seeing the image I'm hoping you are, it says which model shows change over time. Well, they both do. Well, what shows descent with modification, meaning that you're not getting identical clone after identical clone? Well, both of them. Which shows genetic changes between generations? They both do. Which shows changes in allele frequency or mutations or natural selection or genetic shuffling? Both of them do. So if any of these are going to be used and said, this is evolution, I'm saying that doesn't distinguish between these two models. And if you want to call that part of the evolutionary model and it's observable, I'll say, okay, it's observable, but it's part of the creation model. So we're back at square one saying, okay, we can agree that there are changes over time, but in order for something to be an evolutionary change, it has to be the kind of change that will turn one kind of thing, like a worm, into a different kind of thing, like a fish, into a different kind of thing, like a lizard, thus explaining where all of the different kinds came from. Showing that shuffling and disseminating existing genes can create a wide variety of variations within a kind isn't evolution, because that's exactly what the creation model teaches. And of course, it is part of what evolution would expect, but those are not evolutionary changes unless they are the direct result of new genes coming into existence that didn't exist in the past. Now,
okay, first I got to ask, do you have a specific definition or a mechanistic definition for what a kind is? Or are you using that to kind of lump species and clade together?
A kind would be, it's going to change depending on what collection of animals we're looking at, but it's going to be generally what we'd probably consider like a class or an order. It's going to be those that either presently can reproduce, or at least those which in the past could have reproduced according to their genetic boundaries. Now, again, this is where some of that gray line comes in that we would disagree about, because the evolutionary model would say that if you go far enough back in time, they would all be able to interbreed, even if going back to the bacterial starting point, but that first universal common ancestor. Whereas I would say that whatever genetically defines, say, canines, is unique to them, that causes dogs to be dogs. Dogs give rise to dogs. Dogs came from dogs. That dogs cannot produce something that isn't a dog. It can take all of the genes that exist in dog populations and shuffle them so that there is a wide diversity. Like we have like 400 variety of pet shop dog. And there's a lot of diversity in what they look like, the size of their nose, how tall they are, you know, what they eat, where they can live, all of that. But all of those are still genetically at their core just dogs and are the result of genetic shuffling of the genes that already existed in that parent population. Which, again, there's not a lot of disagreement about that in terms of the fact that we expect that 400 varieties of pet shop dog to be originated from some kind of parent population.
Yeah, but so, the issue that you're running into is that you're taking the genetic code for dog and you're labeling that genetic code as dog, when that genetic code is merely genetic code that presents as dog. But if you alter that genetic code, it can present as other things. So you're
Sure,
kind of
for it.
looking at it in that reverse structure. So it's the genetic code itself continues along, and those minor changes as a result of evolutionary pressures cause changes, which is why we eventually get speciation even amongst the canid species. There are species of dogs that cannot breed with other species. Well, there are species of dogs that cannot breed with other species of dogs. We've seen
Sure.
speciation in that as a result of our pressures, as a result of the things that humans have done to them, and somewhat in the form of nature. But this still doesn't define what a kind is, because there's no mechanistic definition for what a kind is. So we know class, order, phylum, so on and so forth. So the kind doesn't really sit in there, because we have multiple types of kinds that cannot breed with each other, because there's been speciation within, if you want to use the term kind, there's been speciation within that kind. So that's how we diversify them, by saying particular species. They are of a species, and then they are of this classification. So there's still no definition there. And I think and that's why the Bible is not reliable as a science book, because the Bible is written by individuals that had very little to no understanding of the planet around them. The individuals who wrote the Bible, and we can even go, and it's not even the oldest stuff on record. We know
before you
go
attacking the authors of the Bible, can we?
No, I'm not attacking the authors. I'm not attacking the authors of the Bible. I'm saying the individuals that wrote them lacked a fundamental understanding of the planet and its systems. It's like, I mean, the people that wrote the Bible even plagiarized from previous stuff. We know that the flood myth came from Gilgamesh.
That's not true, and it has nothing to do with this topic. So
it does have something to do with this topic. You're taking, but no, that's where the term kind comes from. You're taking it from the Bible. Okay.
Well, yes.
And if your terminology has no scientific bearing. So therefore we must go to the source of your terminology. And the source of your terminology is a book written thousands of years ago by bloodthirsty goat herders who had no functional understanding of the planet. So
hold on.
There is no scientific basis for a kind. There's no scientific basis for a kind. I'm sorry. Learn taxonomy and learn phylogeny, and then you will be able to. I see
why you've had timed responses before, because.
And then you'll be able to form a coherent response.
Right. So go on a bit of Orange. What's your?
I had a coherent response, but I think it's gone now. It ran away.
Just so the sticking point is the topic of what is a kind, and
right. I summarize. I'm sorry, but whether or not you think that the flood legend was plagiarized doesn't change what the word kind means in this context. So again, that's veering way off far left there. So
what is the definition of a kind?
The definition of a kind has to do with those variations that are capable of reproducing within their genetic boundaries. So
that's a species.
Here's what I mean. Okay,
that's the definition of a species.
Here's the thing. Define dog. Whatever you define dog as, there are going to be two major factors about defining what a dog is. One's going to be its physical traits, and second are going to be the genes that result in those physical traits. So you've got its phenotype and its genotype. And there's got to be some agreement as to dog or canine or Canis familiaris, whatever term you're going for, has to have these qualities. Okay, so whatever has those qualities, generally they're able to interbreed, but as you said, some have been developed to the point where they have lost the ability to breed with certain others, so that, like, you can breed a Chihuahua and a Beagle, which results in a very funny dog, but you can't probably breed either of those with a Mastiff. But if you go back a couple generations to something which is still a dog by that definition, it still has the genes that define it as dog and the physical traits that define it as dog, then the ancestors of those in recent time could interbreed. They had not lost the ability to interbreed because of, again, whatever genetic shuffling or loss in genes.
So speciation. This is the definition of speciation.
Right, but the problem is that if speciation does not result from the creation of new genes for new structures, functions, and behaviors, it's not an evolutionary change, because that kind of change is just showing the loss of the genes that the original dog population had, so that they have lost the ability to interbreed, but they've not gained new genes for new structures, functions, and behaviors, which is what you have to have in order to grow the Darwinian tree of life. Otherwise, dogs stay dogs, stay dogs, stay dogs until they lose enough genes to go extinct, and there's no more poodle.
There's another issue right there, is that you keep falling back on the Darwinian tree of life. And Darwin, we are far beyond Darwin. Darwin had a rudimentary understanding, kind of a glimpse of what evolution was, and that was his theory as to how the divergence or speciation of Darwin's finches. But we are many, 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 many years beyond Darwin. We have a better understanding than Darwin ever did of evolution, of evolutionary biology, of what evolutionary pressures do, of the effects of genetics. We've mapped the genome. We understand these things. So we keep falling back on really, really old science, and it's not necessary. We need to bring it up to the point here. The work that's being done out of Berkeley, the work that's being done out of MIT, the things that we understand mechanistically about genetics and how they play a role and the effects of evolutionary pressures upon those genetics. And we go back to the work of like Gould, who and evolutionary stasis, and that we see in the fossil record that species become stable for long periods of time until evolutionary pressures incite evolutionary changes by selecting for particular gene alleles that get repeated over time. But this is how humans speciated from. This is how humans diverged from Floriensis, from Neanderthal, from Cro-Magnon, from the red deer people.
You're just repeating your faith in evolution, though.
It's not faith in evolution. This is demonstrable science. It's not faith. It's demonstrable science because I can see it. I can demonstrate it. It's observable. I can measure it, and I can make predictions with it. Therefore, I don't need faith
to
just accept the evidence.
You just said
atheists don't have faith.
Sorry.
It's either we accept the evidence, we accept the evidence, we don't accept the evidence, or we don't know. Because we're humble enough to say that we don't know something. And we will not insert a God as an explanation for what we don't know.
We're way off topic again here. I appreciate your dedication to atheism, but that's a totally different topic.
No, but you made an assertion about me that was absolutely wrong. You're asserting that I have faith in things, and I don't. I have degrees of certainty that are either weak or strong, dependent upon the evidence.
So you would not say you believe evolution is true?
I accept the evidence that evolution is true.
But you don't believe it?
I accept the evidence that evolution is true.
But you don't believe it?
Belief is not necessary. I accept the evidence that evolution is true. And when more evidence comes along that may change that model, then I will accept that model if that model is proven objectively true.
Let's talk about what kind of changes then that need to happen in order for something to be an evolutionary change.
But here's the issue: we keep talking about the mechanisms of genetics.
The mechanisms. 5 minutes.
No, we keep talking about the mechanisms of genetics and the mechanisms of evolution.
Check the timer.
But the problem is, where is God in this? Because your entire argument is making the pre-assumption that God exists. You have to start there to get later on.
No. We're talking about evolution.
For it.
No, listen. We're talking about evolution right now. I haven't started talking about creation.
Okay? If we can give you just 2 or 3 minutes just to address everything that, because I know you've tried to get a few points out. We'll just give you 2 or 3 minutes, and I have interrupted you there. Sorry, mate.
I'm doing my
best. Give you 2 or 3 minutes, and
we're all friends here,
just to get everything out. Okay, go on.
So let me make real clear. Like I said in my introduction, and I realize this is probably unusual for a creation presentation, but I am very clear that I do not consider faith in God, faith in the Bible, and acceptance of any particular interpretation of Genesis, theism, or intelligent design. None of that is necessary to see that evolution fails. In order to see that evolution fails, the only thing you need to understand is what kind of changes have to take place for evolution to happen. And this is why I think it's so important to define evolution according to what I'm calling Darwinian terms. Now, if you want to use a different term, that's fine, because I'm not relying entirely on the 1859 publication to be like, well, in the 1850s, he said this, and that's the only thing I care about. I get it. He knew nothing about genetics. But my definition of evolution incorporates genetics and the fact that genetics is an important component. So, for instance, like I said, when we define what dog is, what is the dog kind? Or if you want to go with phylum or class, wherever you go for dog, let's go Canis familiaris, the pet shop dog. You got a dog at home. What does it mean that it's a dog? You're going to go for some phenotype, some kind of physical traits that it's got in terms of its legs, its fur, its teeth, things that make it different from your cat. There's some overlap there for the bigger classification of mammal. A dog being just dog has to have certain traits, and those traits are created by the DNA information in its many, many genes. So in order for dog to be dog, it's got to have the genes that create the physical traits that we define as dog. So dog doesn't have the gene for antlers. Moose has that. So one of the defining traits that separates dog from moose is antlers. And the reason why they have that difference is because the moose has the gene for antlers and the dog does not. So again, basic genetic understanding. I don't expect any of you to be surprised by this. But the point is, to make something an evolutionary step up, you have to have an increase in genetic information, gaining genes that didn't previously exist. And those genes code for structures, functions, and behaviors that didn't previously exist. So when you have, however long ago you want to think it is, you've got just fish. There's nothing with legs on the earth. It's just fish and worms and bacteria. Nothing with legs. In order to get from fish to something with legs, the lizard or amphibian, however, whichever path you think went first, there has to be a gain of the genes that result in legs and the ability to walk and the structures and functions that have that. You can't shuffle fish genes and get legs, because there aren't any genes in the fish populations that, if you just define fish as anybody would, as something that swims, it doesn't have the legs and lungs. It doesn't have the genes for legs and lungs. So that if you have your ancient just fish world, that you've got Earth that has no legged animals of any kind, you can shuffle those fish genes for 1 billion years and it won't result in lizards, because shuffling the existing genes doesn't create new genes that didn't previously exist. It doesn't create the genes for legs and lungs and the things that make a lizard a lizard. So
unless
if you're showing
talking
me
about lung fishes that have lungs.
Well, clearly, a fish with lungs would have the genes for lungs, but no, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about just fish.
Well, lungs are merely adapted air bladders that have altered over time via mutation and allowed fish to transition from sea to land. That's
Right,
how we
but
get mud
again,
skippers.
That's not an observation. That's a statement of your faith.
That's an
not a
observation.
statement
We've
of
observed.
observation.
We've observed that. That's why we share. That's why all species on the earth do share some level of DNA with everything else.
Who observed fish evolving lungs? Clearly, it wasn't you. Who do you know that saw that happen?
Okay, I'll concede on that we can infer that from what we see today, because that's what we have to infer from back then. But the evidence that we have today supports that inference. When we track things back through the evolutionary model, we can see where things begin to converge.
Did you hear yourself say it? When we track it back through the evolutionary model, which, like I said in my introduction, you're using evolution to interpret the observable facts.
No, we're using the evidence we have
evidence.
today. We're using the evidence we have today to make inferences about what happened in the past. And then we make predictions, and then we utilize that to make predictions, and then we find them in the fossil record and we support them. The problem is that you're leaving out vast groups of science in order to attack one thing. So you're attacking evolution, but you're not attacking. But you're leaving out the discoveries in biology. You're leaving out the discoveries in paleontology. You're leaving the discoveries in archaeology. All of these fields all come together with their own pieces to add to the table to create the model of our reality, to create the model of what we know. And that evolutionary model has many fields that go into it. You can't address one without addressing all of them. They all work together.
Right, but only if you interpret the data through the evolutionary lens and with the expectation of evolution.
Not so, because we can interpret through many lenses. We can interpret it through the geologic lens, through the archaeological lens, many lenses.
No, that's not what I mean.
Then we can infer what happened by making predictions now. We make predictions now, those predictions come true, and then we can say, because they were true now, there's no reason why they're not true then, because there is nothing to say that they weren't true then. So then we make inferences going backwards to say this is where possibly. Then we map through genetics. We map genomes. We see comparative DNA, and we trace those back. And then we find evidence in fossils. We say, oh, there's evidence of this, and then we begin to create our evolutionary lines. And everything on this planet, every living carbon-based organism on this planet, traces back to single-celled organisms that most likely came from hydrothermal venting deep in the ocean in the Earth's very early years.
Can we bring up my slide that's called example similar features? I don't know what number it is. I apologize. I didn't realize it was numbering them.
No, I put them onto a PowerPoint last minute, so it's my fault. The numbered. It was called examples of similar species.
No, example similar features. It's got 4 limbs for human,
7.
dog, bird, and whale.
It's on the screen now.
Okay. So, Jay, are you seeing what's being put up, or do I need to describe to you what they're looking at? Okay. So here's what I'm talking about, is that there is, in terms of science, there is observable facts. That, like this, we can look at the skeletal structure of different types of mammals, and we say, oh, look, there's similar bones. Now, the evolutionary paradigm would say, well, because we expect that mammals all evolved from some mammal ancestor, we expect that these are homologous features because our evolutionary tree tells us that all of these different modern creatures evolved from that past ancestor that had the radius and ulna. As a creationist, I would say, no, this is common design, which shows a common engineering solution to a common engineering problem, that all of these creatures need the ability to rotate the forelimb like this. Well, how do you do that? Having two bones here and the intertwined muscles allow for a rotation around that central axis, which makes it a very smart engineering solution. And so you would expect that a common designer who does things well would do things similarly as he's solving the same problems for different types of creatures. So while you're looking at the different sciences and saying the science today shows me that evolution is a fact, and so I can assume that when I look back at the fossils or when I think about where did lungfish come from, I already have this established scientific paradigm of evolution to interpret those facts. I'm telling you that the facts that we observe today also have to be interpreted in terms of what they mean according to that bigger story. If we're not doing anything about the origins, we would look at this and go radius and ulna, and we would have no disagreement. The disagreement comes into where did these come from? Neither of us has seen the origin of the dog. I believe the origin of the dog is God created the dog kind. Your model, the evolutionary model, would say the dog kind evolved from some prior potentially rodent mammal kind or some intermediate step between there.
Most likely.
Again, the observable fact is all the same for us. We don't have evolutionary evidence and creation evidence. We have observable facts. Right, the fossil record is not evolutionary evidence; it's fossils that have to be interpreted.
No, it's evidence of life as it diversified.
Okay, fossils are the remains of dead things buried in rocks.
Our evidence of species as they existed at that time, and then we can track those.
Oh, yeah.
Through the evolution through the fossil record, through the geological fossil record.
Okay,
so, but ultimately, everything you just said in your similar features argument hinged on one simple thing: you need to have a creator, because you automatically you presupposed a creator to create these changes to solve problems that he was running into. Why would he have problems? Why would he have problems that he was running? Why did he need to solve problems?
It's not a problem in that sense.
But that's the way you stated it. That's the way you stated it. So
but that's
let's go back.
It means in this context.
You're still presupposing a creator to make these things happen. Where is your evidence for that?
Sorry, just going through the 4 different topics we went through there.
No, I'm saying everything you just said, that whole slide hinges on one simple thing: that you have, that there is a creator in order to kick these things off. Where is your evidence for that?
Okay. But then if I could reasonably show you that evolution is impossible, as I'm proposing,
there's no evidence for God in evolution. There is no evidence for God or a creator in evolution. Whether these systems the question is whether these systems had a creator to kick them off, or whether they kicked off by their own means through natural processes of this universe. The question still hinges for creationism, creator. Is there a creator? Where is your evidence for a creator? Because it's not in evolution. And it's not in geology. It's not in archaeology. Where is your creator? That's the issue. Is that's why I brought that up in my intro. Is faith, the issues of faith? Okay,
right, but your faith is atheism and evolution, and
I don't have faith.
Pretend it's not a religion.
I accept the evidence. Stop putting words in my mouth. The question is, where is your evidence for a creator?
Well, here's the thing. I can answer that, but I feel like I presented the explanation of what evolution has to be in order to be evolution, and I just keep getting in response.
No, you misrepresented misrepresented evolution is the problem.
That way.
No, you were doing what Ken Hovind does, and you misrepresent evolution and known demonstrable sciences in order to justify the narrative that comes from your holy book.
You keep saying that.
We have documentation that proved. Actually, I shouldn't say proved. It is evidence. Proof is mathematics, but that is evidence to the contrary. So the question still remains. We've narrowed the gap to does it exist? Because you keep wanting to insert God into these gaps. Well, there's no gaps in evolution anymore.
I haven't done that yet.
You have. You've inserted God as a creator into the gaps of what you don't understand about evolution or evolutionary sciences or evolutionary biology. So the question remains. No. We've shored up those gaps. The question then goes back as to where it all came from, to abiogenesis.
You fill
Did
the
a
gap with your
creator
own
kick
faith
the
in
whole
evolution.
thing off? Did the whole
Evolution
thing?
of the gaps is not an answer. It's not science.
No,
It's
there are
your
gaps
faith
in
the
your
unobservable past.
There are gaps in your knowledge in evolution. There are things you don't understand about evolutionary sciences or genetics. You've gleaned bits and pieces without embracing the whole. And you've cherry-picked, you've intellectually dishonestly cherry-picked what suits your narrative without embracing all of the science altogether, all of the fields altogether. So the question is, I'm not calling you a liar, I'm calling you intellectually dishonest.
Well, you said dishonest.
Because you know what you're doing. So the question is presenting evolution is shored up. There is no argument
trying to change the subject.
So the argument comes back to creationism. Is there a creator? Do you have evidence to support what your entire argument stems from? No. Is there a creator? That's what I'm after.
My argument, I've got two different positions I'm defending. The first is that evolution fails on its own merits, and I'm trying to get through that concept first, but you keep changing the subject.
But it doesn't. It demonstrably does not.
Sorry for interrupting.
Does not.
Sorry for interrupting, guys, but I can see the 2 points that I can see, obviously, Jail Truth, exactly what you're trying to say. Where is the evidence for the creator? Where's the evidence for God? A bit of Orange, I can see exactly what you're trying to say. You're trying to have your argument of why you think evolution is impossible. Let's just separate those, and let's just have a bit of Orange. If you could just give us 2 minutes just to answer that question, where is the evidence for a creator? And then we'll go straight on to why you think evolution is impossible. How about that? But we'll give you 2 minutes just to articulate your response to that question. Where is the evidence for a creator?
Okay, sorry. What is it you want me to address first right now?
So, well, if we address the where is the evidence for the creator question first, give you 2 minutes for that. And then let us know when you're done, and you can formulate your argument on why evolution isn't. Obviously, we'll give Jail Truth a chance to respond, but then we will absolutely get to the argument of how you want to prove evolution is impossible. Okay, we'll separate the two. So off you go.
Okay, well, I mean, in a sense, it's two sides of the same coin. Is that the reason why I'm attacking evolution is that we have the observable fact of diversity of life on Earth, plants and animals of different kinds, some of which can interbreed with each other, like all the pet shop dogs, and some of which we can't, like cats and dogs. So the question is, where did these come from? And either they were designed by an intelligence, or they were just the product of nature acting naturally left to time. So the question is, can what we know about nature and natural processes result in what we see in the biological world? And so that's why I defined evolution the way I did, because it explains the Darwinian tree of life and brings in genetics. Because like I said, with defining what a dog is a dog because of certain traits, and those traits are coded for in genes, and those genes are unique to that kind of plant or animal. So there has to be some explanation as to, if you start off with just bacteria, you don't have the genes for fish and lizards and moose. Those have to come from somewhere. So my point is, if you show all the proposed mechanisms of evolution, everything we know about nature, everything we know about chemistry, everything we know about probability, these things accidentally writing their own DNA, even if we just pretend that the origin of life isn't an important part of the story, which it is, but I get why that gets left behind. I'm arguing that if we just take a neutral scientific look at what can be known and define evolution according to what it's supposed to do, it fails on its own merits. Well, now that nature cannot account for the life that we have on Earth, plants and animals, and ourselves included, well, where did we come from? If we're not the product of nature, because there is, amongst other things, too much information and complexity in living things, information and complexity demand an intelligent designer. Well, now we have to go down that path and say, well, what is the reasonable explanation for this? DNA has information. Information only comes from a mind. And again, even if you go down the road of panspermia, well, aliens put us here. Well, where did the aliens come from? If we've decided that panspermia is the answer because evolution can't happen here because it's just too complicated, the DNA can't write itself. A living cell is too complex to fall together by accident, however much time you think that you've got. Well, then giving it to aliens on another planet, you just take that same evolutionary problem and put it somewhere else. So where did they come from? It doesn't answer the question. It just moves it to somewhere else. And you go, okay, I'm going to put it behind this wall and pretend it's not a problem anymore. So intelligent design becomes the obvious result of looking at observable facts outside of the evolutionary paradigm. Because again, when you start off with the evolutionary lenses and you look at DNA, you go, well, we don't know how, but somehow it fell together by accident because of nature. Moving on. And then you just turn your back on it and pretend it's not a problem anymore. But everything we know about DNA and information and probability and chemistry tells us that that's impossible. Not the, I don't know how it might have happened, so God must have done it, but we know it's impossible. Like, look at any car on the street. Did that fall together by accident? Would have been a whole lot easier for that to happen than for DNA to write itself and code for a cell that it builds. And, so science shows that the evolutionary paradigm is improbable to the point of impossible. And that's why mutations can't save the day now. That, well, how do you get a fish to develop legs and lungs? There's got to be slow, gradual changes in its genes that whatever it's got, the fish parts, it changes the DNA without killing the fish to the point where you get legs and lungs and the associated behavior and the cranial software to run all of it. Again, mutations, observable information about mutations says that that's impossible because mutations are always the destruction or distortion of existing genetic information, which tells us two things. Number one, that there was existing genetic information in the past, and when we see mutations happen, it's breaking down information that did exist in the past, not that it's creating it as it goes along. We only see the eventual breakdown, whether that's through lethal mutations that cause like immediate disease or death, or through the gradual accumulation of what we call neutral mutations until it causes eventual disease or death. But that's the only mechanism of evolution which can create that new genetic information so that the fish population can someday have legs and lungs and walk on land and be lizards. But it's the only mechanism that could do the job, but everything that we can observe and even just basic probability tells us that it's impossible for that to happen, so that unless you come into it saying, well, I know evolution's a fact, therefore, if you just say, well, what do we know? Well, we know that can't happen any more than you can like dump out a bag of Scrabble tiles and get, the lyrics to the Star Spangled Banner. So, I mean, there's multiple different ways to go here, but in my head, it's two different tracks. That if you just look at evolution by itself and you define it so it doesn't mean something ambiguous and hazy, like it's change over time, it's increases, or it's a change in allele frequency. But if you define it according to what it has to mean so that fish can turn into lizards over time, which is the story that it means to tell, then we see that it's impossible. Well, now that we know that nature can't create all of this diversity, now that we know that there's information and complexity and specified complexity, things that only intelligence can cause, well, who's the intelligence? Now we go to Genesis chapter 1 and we go, okay, in the beginning God created. Okay, well, who's God? And what do we look for? We look for the expectation of, well, an intelligence would create something that's complex, that solves what are called engineering problems, not problems in the sense of, oh, I screwed up, I have to fix that, but problems in the sense of, if I wanted to be able to do this, what's the most efficient way to do that? And again, we find over and over amazing design and efficiency in created things, and we find the information for that code in the DNA, and the DNA is more levels of complexity and information than we've even begun to fully understand. So both of those are tracks at the same time. And again, of course, the arguments for God, there's a whole slew of different arguments that can be made on that, especially there's general theism, there's specifically the God of the Bible and Christianity. And then, of course, there's the just the philosophical inability to defend atheism, because it's so indefensible that it's had to be redefined to be this absence of something. That it used to be God doesn't exist, and now it's just, well, I just lack this belief in God, which, again, that's a whole other topic which I've addressed on my channel. If you go look for a bit of Orange on YouTube.
Right, Orange, there we are. You've had 3 minutes there, but I believe the question was for you to provide evidence for God. So are you going to get to that, or shall we just go back to the back and forth? Because I didn't hear anything in that statement that proves God is real.
Let me sum up. Okay. Either what we can observe now in terms of biology is the result of intelligent design, or just nature without any intelligent interference. Observable science tells us it cannot be nature left in nature. Therefore, there has to be an intelligent designer. So,
right. And the evidence for the intelligent designer is, because you've still not answered JL Truth's question.
Information in DNA. I've said that multiple times. The irreducible complexity in the cell.
That's not evidence for God.
It's information. It's evidence for intelligent design, and the only intelligent designer that can answer the question is God for various reasons.
Yeah, but you weren't asked to provide evidence for an intelligent designer. You were asked to provide evidence of a God, because an intelligent designer could be interpreted in a myriad of different ways.
Well, right, but I addressed that. I said that you can't just go down the panspermia route, because if you go the intelligent designer is aliens, you're just taking the problems with the inability for nature to do what evolution needs, and you're just putting it somewhere else and pretending that because it's on another planet, it's not a problem anymore. We still don't need God. It can't happen here. but it can probably happen there. It's not an answer. The only solution that actually answers the problem is the transcendent creator God.
I'm going to pass this back to JL Truth now. I'm just going to sum up what I think you said. If I've got it completely wrong, tell me. But I'm going to pass it. It seems to me that you're saying that that in your opinion that biology can't explain evolution, that it doesn't make sense by natural causes, so therefore there has to be a creator, and that's the argument, and that's the evidence for it. The lack of how can I put it? The lack of how possible evolution is the evidence for God. That's what I'm taking from what you say.
Well,
am I way out on that?
It sounds a little bit like you're saying that my argument is because I don't know how it works, God must have done it.
Oh,
and no, again, I realize I'm trying to address what we do know about.
Yeah, I'm going to. So we'll make this quick because we have had a bit of time, and I do want to pass over to JL Truth because I'm sure he's got a lot to say about what you've just said. So if I just give you literally 30 seconds, but I'm going to have to count the 30 seconds out, and I'm going to pass it over.
No, that's fine. I just want to make clear again. My point is not because I don't know how these things could happen. I expect God must have done it. I'm saying that what we do know about probability, about chemistry, about physics, about the structure of the cell, about the information in DNA, nature does not provide the ability for nature to create these things. That they all have the hallmarks of intelligent design and require an intelligent designer. And the intelligent designer has to be someone outside of the physical universe, because otherwise you're just taking the fact that it can't evolve here because it's information that requires a designer, and you're just putting the designer somewhere else and going, well, the designer couldn't have, life couldn't have evolved here, but we'll just say it did evolve somewhere else, so that what we know can't happen here must have happened somewhere else, so we'll just assume that, and we don't need God still.
I'm sorry, I forgot. So we're about to jump down there. I'm just going to give JL, an equal time to respond to what you've got to say there. And I'm sure I've seen him busily writing stuff down, so I'm sure he's got a lot to say. So JL, you've got a good 4 or 5 minutes here just to go.
So amongst all that deflection in which no evidence was given for a creator of it, it's just that the existence of one thing is not evidence for something else. That is the existence of life is not evidence for a creator, for God. That's plus also panspermia is not aliens really coming down. Panspermia is either comets or meteorites bringing elements that didn't occur on this planet and bringing those elements, and that enabling organic chemistry to form and create DNA. So that's that. But nonetheless, I digress from there. The argument for complexity, this has already been shut down. That's the watchmaker fallacy. Just because something looks like it may have design or something is complex, no. That is not evidence of a designer. It just simply means that it is complex. But if you want to talk complexity, let's go with your argument. Let's go with the argument that creationists like the eye argument. The eye is too complex to have formed naturally. Then why are there species on this planet that are not us that have far superior eyesight? Great horned owls, jellyfish have extremely complex sight mechanisms. There's euglenas have photoreceptive antennae that are far superior to us. The mantis shrimp has greater vision, has greater visual acuity than we do. Why are we, as humans, as this incredibly chosen species, why are we some of the weakest and most poorly designed creatures on this earth by compared to other species on this planet who are far superior, stronger, faster, longer lived, don't get sick? Why aren't we like sharks? Sharks don't get cancer? Why do we get cancer? These are the things that you're completely glossing over in that respect. You also completely glossed over throughout the window beneficial mutations, which do occur. We have evidence of those, that mutations are either beneficial, detrimental, or they're neutral. But they are changes in the gene allele frequency that allow for changes to occur. And those changes that are selected for by evolutionary pressures, those are the ones that continue on, that allow those species to continue to breed and survive and pass on their genes. You kind of touched on genetic entropy, which is a bullshit kind of a thing from John Sanford, which has been completely thrown out because his whole genetic entropy idea is based on the second law of thermodynamics. But the second law of thermodynamics requires a closed system, and the Earth is not a closed system. Sorry. That was pretty much it. Yeah, you pretty much glossed over the question is that your entire argument hinges upon presupposing, which means you're a presuppositionalist, presupposing a creator, that none of this could exist without a creator. The problem is There is no evidence for a creator. Okay, the evidence of a tree is not evidence. Or the evidence tree is simply, or the existence of a tree is simply is evidence for the tree existing. Okay, there's no evidence beyond what the tree is. So we have to look at your source. We have to look at the source of your entire argument, which you still continue to refuse. You still refuse to address the source of your entire argument, which is what I'm after. Because this is not this is not a matter of the mysteries or the intricate nature of genetics or like that, because you've completely thrown out another thing you threw out in that whole diatribe was genetics, genetic code. Okay, there is ridiculous amounts of information that does not present in particular species DNA that is dormant. Okay, but if you activate those genes, will cause mutation, either beneficial, detrimental, or neutral. These occur all the time, and they exist in all species. So you're just throwing all that out, saying dog DNA can only produce dogs. Well, that's most of the time, probably 99% of the time. But if you activate some of that dormant DNA that's in there, you get weird and wild variations. You get two-headed dogs. You get dogs with different types of feet. You can elicit all kinds of changes by playing with the genome. But right now, canine DNA is evolutionarily stable. There are no major pressures affecting that. But if some come along climactically or evolution, or maybe even we assert some sort of pressure upon canines, like we have with artificial selection, when we have created this diverse range of dogs that we can enjoy as pets. But ultimately, that will happen eventually, slowly but surely over time. Typically, mutations can die off, but with the rate of breeding, as long as the rate of breeding is up, you will see beneficial mutations arise, and they will pass on those species, they will pass on those genes to their offspring, and so on and so forth. You completely throw out the fact that, yes, weird DNA that does crazy stuff, still exists in humans. At one point, I can actually attest to this personally. At one point during human gestation, we do have gills. That human beings do have gills, and I actually had surgery on my neck to remove the remnants of that, because I used to have a massive lump in my neck, and I was wondering, and it always gets sore, and I didn't know what. So I went to a plastic surgeon, and he did surgery on my neck to remove the remnants, the cartilaginous remnants of that structure before my lungs had developed. And that is in all human beings. He had to remove that from the side of my neck. I can attest to that personally. So that's it. I mean, what they do is that those structures break down, and eventually, as the lungs develop, there's a natural mechanism by which they eventually go away. But sometimes cartilaginous remnants still remain in the body. We have those. I happen to have one in the side of my neck. This still does not go along to answering the question, where is the evidence for a creator? Because there is none. The existence of life, the existence of genetics, the existence of genetic information, the existence of evolution, the demonstrable, laboratory tested, observed, repeatable, and prediction capable model of genetics and evolution does not answer the question as to where is there a God in any of this. Because your whole argument hinges on that one presupposition. Where is your evidence for a creator? Because otherwise, it is simply an insertion of an answer to a question that we have not answered yet. Whereas at that point, I say, I don't know. You say, God.
At that point, I'm going to have to chip in. Sorry, guys, because we do tend to finish by about 9 o'clock, and we do collect questions for the both of you. I think you both had a good chunk there at the end there to get your main points across. If maybe we give you 2 minutes each to summarize what you think of the other person's argument, and it will have to be 2 minutes. I'll have to time that, and then we'll have time left, because there's been loads of people in the chat firing questions at both of you. If you're both happy to answer some of those,
sure,
brilliant.
Sure,
so. A bit of orange, if just give you 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and I will have to time it.
Don't give me more than you want, because I'll just keep talking until you stop me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I am going to have to time this. Just let me get my clock going. 2 minutes, here we go. Right, so just to summarize what you think of JL Truth's argument, say anything you feel that you wanted to say that you've not had a chance to say. 2 minutes, off you go.
Okay, well, first of all, JL, you're a passionate man with a savage beard. It's dope, and I appreciate that. In short, I feel like kind of running into the same problems that I have with other conversations where I feel like I'm saying this, and I feel like he's responding to that. Like I'm saying, if we actually look at what we know about genetics, we show that mutations cause damage to existing genes. And he's saying, go to the gaps. I'm like, so I feel like there's been a lot of hand-waving dismissal and the assertion of his faith as science and my faith as just faith. Whereas when we're talking about the observable facts, we're agreeing that the observable facts are what they are. We're interpreting what we can't see because it's in the past. We're trying to explain where things came from. And while he keeps saying testable, repeatable, predictable, all that, again, when you define evolution clearly, absolutely not. And again, he's just sticking to, I didn't really get a clear definition of what evolution is on his sense, except that it's reproduction and genes get passed on. But again, that doesn't distinguish it from creationism. So I'm still left just kind of with the hazy ambiguity of that evolution, whatever that means, is a fact. And if you don't believe it, you're dumb. Where's your proof for God? So I feel like we could probably have a few more conversations before we really nailed down and actually, communicated so that we were using the same words in the same way. I don't know. What else do you want me to say? I can talk forever. Your mic is off. It's not like me to run out of words, but I don't want to talk just to talk. So,
Yep. Sure. Yeah, I got. I could. The sum up of his position is basically that it all hinges upon the presupposition that there is a creator, and we are looking for evidence of that creator in order to justify the creationist argument. When you say that these things are evidence of God, but unfortunately they're not evidence of God, they're not evidence of any kind of creator, and that's what we're looking for. So we have to go back to abiogenesis. It was there is no argument when it comes to evolution, plain and simple. But it's important to remember that in the pursuit of objective truth, that we must be willing to eschew our biases and our preconceptions. We must follow the evidence, whether direct or indirect, to where it leads. Knowing we can never reach Cartesian certainty, we leave ourselves an opening for future change. For the advent of future evidence, we maintain a willingness to not only alter our scientific model of understanding, but a humility to accept when we do not know an ultimate answer to a question. From there, we must work. We must observe, test, and experiment and to discover the truth, because the moment we start lazily inserting God into the answer spaces, we immediately start to limit ourselves in future advancement. We insult the progress we humans have made in our limited window on this planet. We close doors that should remain open, and we willingly thrust the full responsibility of our own lives for our own justice, or even our decisions and behaviors, into the indefatigable hands of the imaginary. Thank you.
Right,
Wow,
Kat, should we jump straight into the questions?
I didn't write one. That's why I just kind of rambled. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say, I've seen a few questions coming in the chat, and just want to remind everyone that we, if you want to ask a question, we put them all in one place on our community tab. So if you go to the community tab, we post a poll, and that's where we read them from, and then we're not having to scroll up through the chat. Obviously, anyone who's super chatted a question, they're all separate in the YouTube studio. But if you're just asking a normal question, can you put it on the community poll? Otherwise, we just miss it as it scrolls past. So, sorry. Having said that, Creaky, you're in charge of the studio, so you've got the questions.
I like being in charge. It makes me feel so powerful. Most of the super chats this evening have just they've not really been questions, but we'll just very quickly rip through them. £2 from Basic Trigonometry asking what a bit of orange is doing at PhD Tony's house. I get the joke, but I'm not sure if anybody else will.
I get it.
Katz, did I see you pick up a question from John Rapp?
It wasn't a question. It was a quote. He wanted to say, "One man's religion is another man's belly laugh."
Right. Okay.
Apparently, religion is a no word in SC.
Right. Gently's channel, £2. The last paragraph from JL's opening was awesome. $10 from the plot hole for the show coffers. Orange Man, do not use current science. You do not use current science in your argument. Shouldn't you know the most up-to-date scientific evidence in order to be able to refute it?
So I assume that our modern understanding of genetics was modern science. Does it need to be more modern than genetics? I guess I don't get the question. My argument against evolution and my argument for the existence of God both hinge on our understanding of the complexity and function of DNA and molecular biology. Does that not count? I don't have an Instagram account. I can't get more up to date than I am. I'm sorry.
I think
I've hit middle age and I've just slowed down.
A bit of orange if like modern genetics is saying, you know, that it is very, very strong evidence for evolution, you know, I think that's what it's coming out. If modern genetics is saying this is evolution, are you using that evidence necessarily?
I guess I still don't understand the question.
Is it that the things that you're citing are coming from very, very old sources that are outdated, and we have more information that fills in the gaps in that knowledge, and that you haven't resourced that knowledge yet?
No, there's nothing in modern discovery that's told us that beneficial mutations add up until new genes for new structures, functions, and behaviors exist. When you say beneficial mutations, the only examples that we can see that actually are mutations that happen in populations we're watching, or at least are assumed to be so, are things like antibiotic resistance, which ultimately is beneficial because it's the loss of whatever structure or function the antibiotic needed. So that in order for evolution to happen, there's got to be that gain of genes that the previous population didn't have, so that the later population can be a different kind of plant or animal.
Yeah, it's the activation of it's the activation of those genes that are typically dormant that allow for mutations that are either beneficial or detrimental.
You can't make new genes by activating genes that already exist.
No, the genes are already there. The genes are already there. It's whether they activate or not as a result of evolutionary pressures. The data, the information is already there. The information doesn't just appear. The information is already stored in the genetic code. The thing is, what causes it to present?
You're not arguing evolution. You're arguing creation with that.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that's the way DNA works. That's the way DNA works. The information is already there. It's just dependent upon how the information presents itself in the species.
No, if the information is already
there, that's abiogenesis. Dude, that is abiogenesis. That's not evolution. That's you're saying, where did it come from? That's abiogenesis. The whole thing that I was going after in the first place.
No, I'm saying fish don't have the genes for legs and lungs. You can't.
Yes, they do. That information exists in their genetic coding. Okay, it just doesn't present that way.
So you're saying that fish, before there were lizards on Earth, fish already had the genes for all the parts that make a lizard a lizard.
They have the capability of creating. Yes, because the way genetics presents itself in a particular way, if there is a beneficial mutation, then the genes present themselves differently. Then you get different structures in. You get different structures in the species. If that species survives to pass on its genes, then that new structure will continue to present, and it will continue to eventually change until you do get things like mud skippers and lungfish and lampreys, which are technically fish, but they are physically very, very different because evolutionary pressures change and push them in different directions.
Okay, but you've got to distinguish between two things, and you just talked about two totally different things as if they were one thing. Existing genetic information being turned on and off, or mutations creating new genes that didn't previously exist.
Yeah, those are not the same thing. Evolutionary pressures cause changes in gene allele frequency, because evolutionary pressures are what dictate. No, because changes occur all the time, but evolutionary pressures are what dictate which ones make it through to the next level, make it through to the next step to survive and carry on their genes. And the ones that don't are the ones that die. And that is how we get changes, because the old genes, the old presentation, no longer passes on as genetics. The new presentation of those genetics continues on, and that continues on and on over billions of years until you get new structures and new species and new variations.
I know how the model works. The problem is that your statement there is a statement of how we believe, or how an evolutionist would believe, or the evolutionary model.
They don't believe it. There's evidence for that. Don't insert that. Don't insert that sneaky assertion that we believe it. No, you're sneaky. You're smuggling in belief in order to attack it. There is no belief there, sir.
Because it's in the past.
No, there is no belief there, sir.
It is faith in the unseen. That's all it is.
There is evidence to support it.
Once you interpret the evidence according to evolutionary faith,
do not pull evolution down to your level. Okay? We have evidence to support.
You're muted there, mate.
That doesn't change the fact.
So I think Creaky's trying to say something, but he's muted there.
Go ahead.
He's still muted.
Last week he had a microphone issue, so maybe it's the microphone again. I think I know what he's saying. I think he was going to try and move on to the next question, because we do run out of time. The problem being, Creaky he has the studio where he has the super technical questions. So,
bloody microphone. So what I was going to say, because I want to say it, right? Because I was sitting here, I was screaming into my microphone, and I thought you were just both being rude. So, Orange, what you were saying is because JL can't see these evolutionary changes, is they don't exist. Is that your?
What I'm saying is we have to distinguish between what is observable and what we have to interpret according to what we believe.
Observable then. Observable just means that you've seen something. So have you observed God? Because you certainly couldn't offer any evidence for a God when you were asked that question earlier on.
I think I did. I think I answered that question. And
no, you didn't. You skirted around it and completely dodged the question. But we'll move on. We'll move on to the questions anyway. So because JL can't observe the evolutionary changes, they don't exist. So we'll assume from there that you've observed God, and that's why you can be so sure he exists.
That's putting words in somebody's mouth.
No, it's just the way I interpreted your argument. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I really don't think I am. You said JL can't...
He's actually making a logical conclusion based upon your argument.
Evolution doesn't exist because...
I'm making a necessary distinction.
No. By that, you're basically saying that because I can't observe... Actually, I can observe evolution. I can observe it in the lab. So we know that it exists. So there have been numerous studies on this. Okay, numerous.
This is why you have to define it properly, because if it's happening in the lab, it's intelligent design. It's not natural. It's not nature left to nature. You're assuming that whatever we can do in the lab...
Creaky, move on.
Right. Okay, we'll just move on to the next one. $5 Australian from Digital Demonic Davros. Ignorance is not bliss. When a direct question is not answered, it's a regular tactic by dishonest people. Next one then is $5 US from Andy. New genes come from mutations via radiation, chemical interactions, ERVs, etc. Why are you ignoring these? And that question's for you, Orange.
I'm not ignoring them. I'm pointing out that the majority of our observations are that mutations are harmful. They cause death or disease. The larger group after that is what we call neutral mutations, which again we've seen add up to harmful mutations. The fact that JL wanted to hand wave away entropy doesn't make it go away, and trying to argue that the solar system or the universe or whatever you want to say is a closed system or isn't a closed system, that's all. It's trying to just change the subject.
No, it's not. John Sanford based. Sorry, you called me out on that. John Sanford based that entire genetic entropy theory on the second law of thermodynamics. But the problem is, Earth is not a closed system, and the second law of thermodynamics only pertains to closed systems.
So complex information systems left to nature with just time is not going to break down. Like, I don't understand how that would matter. You've got a complex information system. DNA because a lot of letters controlling a lot of machinery.
No, because the second law of thermodynamics doesn't apply to systems. Doesn't apply to systems within the Earth because the Earth is not a closed system.
Yeah.
I think it's a law of physics. How does it not apply?
If you think about it like this, and
you shake your head like you think I'm lost.
I can explain it, but I can't make you. I can explain it, but I cannot make you understand it. I'm sorry.
I can't understand how you're going to say a law of physics doesn't apply and just hand wave that away. Like physics doesn't work here.
Move on, Orange. Move on. So a bit of Orange. If you think about it in terms of the Bible, which obviously no book, it's been translated over and over and over, and you would like to think that when that book was translated, because there was fresh energy put into it, fresh input put into it, none of the quality of the Bible. If you think about it like that, that every time that Bible has been translated, it's been translated as new, okay? Because somebody's applied energy, to put into doing that translation. And it's the same thing with evolution. When somebody, when genes are being passed on from one generation to the next, there are biological processes taking place that require energy to maintain the quality, if you like. So I mean, we could argue
there's spell check mechanisms within the cell, but I mean the point is that when an intelligent being copies information down, they have the ability to look back at the original copy and compare, whereas we're expecting just blind chemical chance to be able to do that work itself without gaining those breakdowns. And because the Earth isn't a closed system, I don't remember what because the laws of physics don't
someone in
apply.
the chat pointed out. Someone in the chat pointed out that it's the difference between a closed system and an isolated system. And I'll actually say that's my bad. The universe itself is an isolated system. That's where the second law of thermodynamics applies. The Earth itself is a closed system, but closed systems don't factor into the second law of thermodynamics. It factors into isolated systems. So sorry, my bad. That was bad wording on my part.
Sorry guys. There's one more super chatted question, right, which I want to get to. Well, there's two more super chats. One's just from $5 US from Varji, just supporting the channel. So thank you, Varji. And there's another question, and I hope I've said that right. There's another question then from Digital Demonic Davros. There are literally thousands of deities or gods. Which one of them is the creator?
And I would disagree with that. I would say when you define what God means, and again, this is why step one is always define your terms. When you define God meaning the transcendent being who can be the cause of the universe, all right, so timeless, spaceless, immaterial, transcendently powerful, and amazingly intelligent, then the thousands of proposed gods there don't deserve the title of God, because the majority of them are going to be, and the vast majority, 99+%, are created beings that exist inside the universe. Like, why not Zeus? Well, because Zeus had parents. He didn't create the universe, he was born in it. Even the God of Mormonism is not the creator of the universe. He was a man who earned his way up to godhood. He's not the cause of the universe, so you can't use any of the arguments for theism to even come to the conclusion that he's God. So when defining God so that he's capable of explaining the existence of the universe, the origin and intelligent design of life, the necessary cause for morality, et cetera, the only God that deserves the title is the God of the Bible. So
why not Ra? Because Ra in the Egyptian polytheistic faith. Ra was capable of everything that you just said.
Okay, I don't know enough about Ra to answer that one.
Or what about Kronos? Kronos is the exact same thing.
Isn't Kronos from a comic book?
No, Kronos is from Greek.
That's Thanos. That's Thanos.
Either way,
I know who Thanos is. I'm a big enough nerd for that. Thank you. I don't know enough about those two. It's just I don't have all 10,000 gods memorized either. I'm just saying that in terms of when trying to come up with the basic philosophical arguments for the existence of God, you're not going to come up with all of those others, because eventually you're going to find that somewhere either directly stated or implied in their theology or the stories about them is going to be that there's some creation or some creator that caused them. That in order to not have an infinite regress,
you're asserting the Judeo-Christian. You're asserting the Judeo-Christian God.
Of course.
Okay, so you're asserting the Judeo-Christian God based on two very subjective pieces. One, the geography of where you were born, and two, the faith of your parents. Because if the faith of your parents, because if the faith of your parents, because you weren't born knowing faith. You weren't born knowing this. You had to be instilled and indoctrinated as a child with what to believe.
Same with math.
So if you've been born geographically in another location, then you would have found a different faith. Your parents would have indoctrinated you with a different belief system. So it's completely arbitrary.
Christians only exist in Illinois.
No, I'm saying that people can choose later on, but that would have been the foundation of your deal, because I mean, what you're doing is that just because you were born here in the States and we are predominantly Christian, the odds were that you would be Christian. But if you were born in India, the odds would be that you could be Hindu or Buddhist. Or if you were born in Japan, you could be Taoist.
Right. This is still the genetic fallacy.
No, that's the problem. The existence of those odds means it's arbitrary. Means that the selection of your faith, the selection of your belief structure is arbitrary, dependent upon multiple factors. The two most primary of which are where you were born and who you were born to.
But even if that's true, you're making a comment about me personally. This has nothing to do with whether or not.
No, I'm saying that your assertion that it is that God is no different from someone who is Buddhist or Hindu asserting Vishnu.
Yeah, I don't think JL Truth is a singling you out as such, Orange. But what he's saying is you're implying that the only God that counts is the God that you believe in.
No, I would say that the only God that can be logically argued to outside of just because the sort of general assumption, like he's implying there, is, well, I was born in the north side of Chicago. I'm a Cubs fan because I happen to be here and I randomly picked a team. But I'm saying that you can make philosophical arguments for the existence of God, but those arguments don't work for the gods of other religions. that when you logically deduce what is the explanation for the universe, for the existence of time, space, matter, energy, for the information in all life, for the fact that there is objective morality, only the God of the Bible answers all of those questions satisfactorily.
No, because individuals who believe in Allah, individuals who believe in Brahman, individuals who believe in Vishnu, individuals who believe in the great architect or the great spirit or Ra or whatever, or Odin or Zeus or whatever, they can all make those same arguments from their perspective.
No, they can't.
Yes, they can. And they are as equally valid as yours because there is no evidence to support either. So that you both have the same equal validation. Pardon me?
This is coming from an atheist.
Well, I have to recognize the logical consistency or the logical value. And the logical value of your argument is the exact same as someone who is a Hindu arguing for theirs.
No, it's not. And
yes, it is. It's only, you can only say no because you are not a Buddhist or a Hindu.
I think
that's the only reason you can say no to that.
Yeah, but the only reason you think your answer is valid is because you're an atheist. But you were
guys. I think that would actually make. I think that would actually make a fantastic.
Super chats because I realize we're.
Sorry, I think that would actually make a fantastic topic for another debate. You know,
and
is there one God? Are gods different? But I think that is a different debate. But I would absolutely love to see that. We do normally finish kind of like 5 minutes before now, and I am aware that we haven't got to the questions on the community poll. So can I ask? If we just rapidly fire maybe 2 or 3 that we choose each from you, can we have like a 30-second short response?
Yeah.
Just I'll do my best.
Is that okay?
Short and pithy.
Short and pithy. Yeah, absolutely.
So I should be able to do that.
We'll get. It's just because we do normally finish 5 minutes before now, but people have asked a lot. So
there's like 43 questions. So what I will say, guys, as well is if you're both happy to do it, is once the stream finishes, if you want to, you can go into the community tab and answer these questions in the community tab as well. So, Catz, because I've been hogging the mic tonight, do you want to take the questions?
Okie dokie. So this one's from Austin Deal, and apologies if we don't get to your question, but this is for you, a bit of orange. Remember, 20 seconds. Do you believe that everything is designed because you believe in a designer, or do you believe everything is designed, therefore there must be a designer?
Well, if we're talking about just my psychology, I don't know, to be totally honest with you, because like he said, if I'd been born somewhere else, I might think something else. But I think the most reasonable explanation based on what can be known and observed is that there is design, that information only comes from a mind, that irreducible complexity has to be the result of intelligence making choices, that everything we know about nature and the laws of physics cannot result in information and specified complexity. Did I do it?
Brilliant. Another one for you here. So I've got a feeling most are going to be for you, but I'll try and even them out. This one is from Kanan Van Ego. I hope I pronounced that right. Interesting on this. How can it be that incest is forbidden in the Bible, but it's the thing that creationists have to admit to in order to put the theory of Adam and Eve through? And also, I suppose if we expand on that and coming off the ark, you know, incest obviously was there.
Right, I get that. Let me do this as quickly as possible. If you take a recent creation with perfect genomes so that there's not the time for harmful mutations to add up, then what we would call incest doesn't combine those harmful mutations so that there is an expression of a disease phenotype. So even as long after as the ark, there wouldn't have been that collection of damaged mutations, whereas later as genetic entropy happens, because I disagree with his assertion that it's false and I believe that it's observable, that if you marry close relatives, then those common mutations result in a disease phenotype, and so that had to be made against the rules. Okay.
Just look at all these questions are for you. Is the one you've seen you want to choose, Creaky? Or?
Sorry. Let's have a look.
Well, thanks for being here, everybody. We appreciate your questions.
Yeah, I think they're all for you. JL, if there is something you want to say after a response to one of these questions, just chip in. Just we're keeping it short.
There we are. I've just come across one which is simple and to the point. If God created us, then there must have been a creator for God. Please explain.
Oh, it's 20 seconds?
Yeah, I know the time frame is short,
I will do my best.
If God is real, who created God? Or did he just magically appear?
Right, I get let me oh gosh. So God exists outside of time, so you're not looking at an infinite expanse of time backwards wherein there is God infinitely in time into the past, or It's philosophically and logically impossible to have an infinite regress into the past. So there has to be a first uncaused cause, a first unmoved mover. And so what philosophy leads us to, that first uncaused cause, that first unmoved mover, is what the Bible describes as God. That he is outside of space, time, matter, energy. He doesn't need a cause. He just is. He is the being from which other being draws its being. 20 seconds is not a lot of time, but I hope that did a little something.
I have seen one that I think is for you, JL Truth, actually. It's from somebody called Still Monkeys, and they say, hello,
Nice.
I'm Still Monkeys. If evolution is true, why is there... So basically, if evolution is true, why do we still have monkeys?
Well, monkeys are cousins. That's a different evolutionary line than human beings were. There were multiple variations of human beings, including Neanderthal, Floriensis. So we had like 8 other cousins, but that was a divergent evolutionary line. The other apes, bonobos, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, these are another evolutionary line. We all trace back to a common ancestor amongst all of us, but that was millions and millions and millions and millions of years ago.
That's it. Creaky, you see anything?
No, but I was so close to a flat. I was so close to a flat Earth joke then, but I resisted. It's not the time or the place. Are we going to ask another one, Catz?
Well, do you think maybe one more? We can find one more for each.
Yeah,
and then
go on. And why not? Innit? There's so many to choose from, and somebody wants a specific definition of kind.
All right, hold on.
And be specific.
Hold on,
mechanistically.
You know what? I was looking at one earlier today, and I thought I should take a screenshot of that because I might need that. And I thought, no. What are the
I've
odds
had it on the screen
all
the way through the debate, if I'm being honest. So I didn't even have to pull it up.
Well, what's yours?
It's a group of people or things that have similar characteristics.
That's not the one I had.
No, that's the definition of it as a noun.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but that's not the specific way in which I was using it. I tried to
redefine species.
No. You're very witty. I'll give you that. Hey, while I'm looking for this, tell us about your movie channel there. Horror films, is it?
Oh, yes. Week in Horror. It's a group of filmmakers, me, myself, my friend Eugene, my friend Alex, and we love horror films. And we decided, why can't we do something? Why can't we sit around like Kevin Smith and talk about things we love? He started with comic books. We started with horror films. So we pretty much, take chronologically the best horror films that we felt came out that week. And every Sunday we drop an episode that basically does deep dives as filmmakers into those horror films, kind of what makes them special, what makes them cool, unique, or what made them suck, who knows. We also do bloodbath debates where we debate horror icons against each other in like legit straight up debates, kind of testing our horror knowledge. And we also do after dark episodes with our special guests, because we have special guests from the horror community and horror industry come on, and we chat with them, and those are all available early release on our Patreon, or if you listen on Anchor, you can get them there as well, or check out our YouTube because they'll be up there. They'll be up there soon.
Cool. I'll definitely tweet those out for you as well. If you can email me all the links, I've struggled, but I will whack them in the description of this video. I'll whack them in the description for both of you of my next Conspiracy Cats video, and I'll tweet them out as well. I have actually got another question for you, Joe. So if Bit of Orange, are you still looking for that thing that you're after?
Well, I found something. I don't know if it's the one I was looking for, but in short, when we use the word kind, we talk about animals reproducing only within their genetic boundaries of their kind, and no kind giving rise to a different kind, which I realize is not probably the one I was looking for. But
what's
again, it just comes down
the source
to,
for that? What's the source for that definition, Orange? Where did it come from?
It's one of my own videos, so I probably got it. Oh, no, that's not the one I'm looking for. Geneticist Georgia Purdom is who I'm trying to quote, and this is not the one I'm looking for.
Yeah, the only reason it's not designed to catch you out. It's just because people will generally say, where did that citation come from? And it's always nice to be able to provide the audience with that information. So if you'd be so kind.
The definition I'm looking for comes from Georgia Purdom, Purdom, I believe. And that's my hazy sort of like recollection of it to fit in this one particular video that I made sort of summarize. So
just to ask, are you talking about a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding? Is that where you're kind of going with that?
It's a good start, certainly.
Yeah, that's the definition of a species.
Okay. Well, I mean,
there you go.
Again, there's not universal agreement on what species is, because I've seen people say
I just read you the definition.
I said universal. I didn't say there's none that exists.
That is universal. That the definition of species is
okay. Well, if you let me finish my sentence,
globally that's scientifically accepted. That's the scientific definition of a species.
Okay. Well, some people will argue that species have to be able to interbreed in order to be one species. Some people will say no, they don't have to
capable of
be able
exchanging
to
genes or interbreeding.
Right, and so some people would not accept that as a definition of species.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying.
You're creating arguments to support your narrative. So we'll move on.
Just for full disclosure, definition of kind, Georgia Purdam. It's the biblical definition of kind from the Hebrew Bible. So again, it's the definition that suits your narrative. So.
Merriman?
I've got one last question. This is for you, JL Truth. Mm-hmm. And it says, it's for a bit of orange. Sorry, this is for you. Okay. Although I've heard it used from creationists to evolutionists as well, so maybe one for both of you. Darwin's finches adapt to different beaks, but what prevents them from evolving to the size of ostriches?
Okay, so this sort of goes into the main point I was making, is that a variation here. So again, whether or not you consider these finches to be 13 different species or one different species depends on who you ask and what you're reading. So as far as I know, and from what I've read, they are capable of interbreeding with each other and therefore would be considered by most to be one species. But again, not really to the point, that's a semantic argument. But all of these would be a variation on one created kind, in the sense that all of the genes for all 13 of those variations exist in all of them and is just expressed differently. The same way that we have genes for brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, that we're all one species, but we have alleles for different variations. So that what you're seeing here is not the slow gradual addition of new genetic information that will increase until they become a different kind of thing. You're just seeing the shuffling and expression of the genes that already exist in the population. And it varies depending on, as has been said, environmental pressures, that some of those variations survive better in different conditions. And so you see more of them, but that variation still has the genes for all the other variations. It's just how it's expressed. Did that answer your question?
Have you got anything you want to add to that? The beaks?
Okay, go ahead and reread the question real quick.
Essentially, why would something like a finch not evolve to the size of an ostrich, or why?
Because that's not how evolution works.
Yeah,
but to be fair, it depends on what genes they have, because there are
evolutionary pressures that made the finch what it is, and there's evolutionary pressures that made the ostrich or the emu or the cassowary or anything like that made them what they are. So those evolutionary pressures came beforehand, which is why you'll never see a finch turn into an ostrich, but you would see a common ancestor diverge into either one.
Okay, but there are bats that are the size of a bee. They're can fit on a penny, and there are bats with a 6-foot wingspan.
Yeah.
So, if they have the genetics to be able to diversify into such big different sizes, I don't know, maybe a mega finch is not impossible, but I mean, probably not on the same island. Maybe in a different environment. Maybe
there you go. You just touched on it. You literally just touched on it. A different island. That's a different evolutionary pressure. Okay, varying evolutionary pressures are what create those changes. The common ancestor that those two delineate from are the evolutionary pressures are what cause them to diverge, eventually become what they are. The ones that became finches didn't need to increase in size in order to survive. The ones that became ostriches did need to increase in size in order to survive. So the ones whose genes presented as larger with longer legs, the ability to run faster, eventually they lose the adaptation for wings because wings are a hindrance to the ones with smaller wings and smaller wings and smaller wings, till eventually you have an ostrich. Over millions and millions of years, you have finches.
Which again is a statement of your faith in the unobserved, and I would say that they were just made according to their kind.
That's evidence. Please stop doing that. It's not faith.
I'm calling it what
evidence.
It is.
It's not faith because there's evidence. Faith is evidence in things unseen. We see these things as evidence. That is evidence. Please stop doing that.
You said that ostriches needed to evolve in size.
I'm asking you politely. Please stop smuggling that in.
I am telling you that you are making these claims. You said ostriches needed to increase in size because where they were. That's not an observed fact. That's a statement of faith based on your evolutionary assumptions.
No, that's what we observe from the fossil record as the species was selected for, as certain genes were selected for, that eventually led to what we see now as an ostrich. Longer legs, flightless wings incapable of flight, long neck.
But that's still based on your faith in evolution, not on an
That's not a faith in evolution. There's evidence for it. Stop smuggling that in.
I'm not smuggling.
I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you right now. Stop smuggling it in.
I'm not smuggling it.
You are smuggling it in. I'm asking you to stop because I'm aware of what you're doing. Why would you assume that I'm not smart enough to recognize that you are smuggling this shit in? Stop doing it.
I am being honest about what you're saying, and you're
no, you're not.
Me about that.
No, you are not, sir. You're trying to smuggle in that what we have evidence for as a belief structure, and it is not.
You're calling evidence something that you admitted isn't something that you didn't and cannot see.
Let me boil it down. Let me boil it down as this. If new evidence comes along that changes the evolutionary model, like changes it, I will accept that change in the evolutionary model. If evidence came along that completely if evidence came along that completely took God out of the picture.
You already said Darwin is already so old that nobody considers him.
Can I finish the thought here? If evidence comes along that changes the model, I can accept that evidence. If evidence came along that completely took God out of the equation, absolutely, with no question, removed God from the equation, would you be able to accept that? No, you wouldn't. Moving on.
Wow. And this from an atheist who defines atheism as being just a lack of belief.
That's exactly what it is. Anyway, guys, I think this could go on and on and on. So I personally would like to invite you both back at a later date because I think this conversation could go a lot further than we've had the time to take it tonight. Katz, what do you think? Plus, it's nearly past my bedtime. Come on.
I think man needs his beauty sleep.
Yeah. And a lot of it.
You could put me in a coma and it wouldn't do me any good. Listen, I just want to thank the both of you for doing it. We've had people come on in the past few weeks who've debated and kind of reached a common ground and a bit of understanding. You know, I don't think that's happened tonight. I think you're going to go. You know, I don't think you've changed each other's minds at all on anything. But I really appreciate the fact that you've both stepped in. What's been quite late notice. You're both obviously prepared. You know, I've seen all the slides and stuff you've sent me, a bit of orange, and you certainly obviously put your work into your presentations and your statements, Sir JL Truth. So I appreciate everything both of you done. I echo Creaky's thoughts. I'd love to have both of you back either separately or against each other if there's anything you want to debate. And I will absolutely just send me an email, anything you want me to shill, and I'll tweet it out. I'll put it in the descriptions, and we'll, you know, hopefully we send a bit of traffic your way. So thank you both of you for everything you've done, and I'll say goodbye properly when the stream's over. But thank you for everything.
Thanks for having us, man. JL, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure.
Spirited conversation, sir.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Creaky. Thank you, Katz.
No problem at all. Right, thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget, if you don't subscribe already, what the hell is wrong with you? Just hit the button. It's free.
Oh, hang on.
And we will see you next week.
We've had a super chat skip. Hang on.
Do it.
Free Jemmy says, have we skipped a super chat? Did we miss one? Free Jemmy.
Well,
Fry Jemmy.
It's not that we've missed it. But the idea of super chats isn't for us to insult one of our guests, so it was selectively skipped.
Oh,
but
my mother.
If you insist, JL Truth, if evolution was true, why does an orange boy grow a brain? I was being polite.
It is my mother.
The idea of super chats is to get your question noticed, not to allow you to insult one of the debaters.
That's a good question. If we're so evolved, why am I so stupid? Figure that one out.
I haven't seen his brain. I have no evidence.
Exactly.
I have pictures of it.
And on that note, guys, we're calling it done. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Are we